Coming up next, we got a brand new series for you. We're exploring one of the most polarizing yet powerful forces in rock history. It's a type of song that rock bands used to put out all the time, loved by fans, loathed by many artists, and even dismissed by record labels who feared it would drive listeners away. Yet this so-called guilty pleasure became a defining sound of generations. We're going to give you the anatomy or history of this in 5 songs. One of these hit songs was so powerful it started a baby boom in one part of the country. Another one was so beloved it forced a cable network to stop playing it, just to give other bands a chance. And yet another that had one of the most electrifying vocals ever because the band transposed the song in the wrong key, forcing the lead singer to sing a full 2 steps above his vocal range. We got some great stories coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock here, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever tried to raise a family of sea monkeys after seeing an ad in the back of your comic book back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the white button and click the bell so you always know when our stuff comes out. Make sure to sign up at professorofrock.com for exclusives that only you can see. Today we're giving you a brand new series here on Professor of Rock. It's a brand new show. I'm calling it Anatomy of a, it'll be different every time, Anatomy of a blank. Now, anatomy is defined by Webster's dictionary as a separating or dividing into parts for detailed examination or analysis. On this show, depending on what will fill in the blank of Anatomy of a, we'll break down the top 5 songs or artists that created or defined a cultural institution. Today's episode, we look at the 5 songs that created the cultural institution that we all know is the power ballad. Anatomy of a power ballad is going to show us the top 5 songs that made the power ballad. We're going to jump in the time machine and go all the way back to 1971, where it all began with a spotlight on the transcendent composition Without You, arguably the first power ballad.
I can't live.
Without You was written by Pete Ham and Tom Evans of the Welsh rock band Badfinger, and it first appeared on their 1970 album No Dice. Arguably the song that defined the term power ballad. Again, people have different interpretations, but that's what I think.
Living is without you. I can't live.
Been recorded by over 180 artists with 2 versions, Harry Nilsson's 1971 and Mariah Carey's 1994 versions that became massive international hits. For our Anatomy of the Power Ballad episode here, we're going to go back to the genesis of this epic track and then zero in on Nilsson's version, the one that took Heartbreak to soaring cinematic heights and set the standard for every power ballad that followed. The story of Badfinger's Pete Ham and Tom Evans is a tragic one of the most tragic in rock history. The lives of both of these talented musicians ended in them taking their own lives. Pete Ham in 75 at the age of 27 and Tom Evans in 83 at 36. Although Pete and Tom didn't hear the potential greatness of the song when they collaborated on it, Without You is perhaps their finest professional achievement. Now, the troubled romance between Tom Evans and his future wife, Marianne, was a big inspiration for the making of Without You. So I guess one evening, Tom Evans showed up at Marianne's friend Karen's door, desperation written all over his face. He said, "She's left me. I need her back. I can't live without her." Unable to bear the thought of losing his Marianne, he boarded a flight to Bonn, determined to win her back. Now, in his anguish, he poured these emotions into a song, one that captured the raw devastation of heartbreak. He called it I Can't Live, and its chorus bled with that sorrow. I can't live if living is without you. I can't live, I can't give anymore. Now, meanwhile, his bandmate Pete Ham, he'd written a verse, something warm and sweet and really sentimental. When their 2 songs came together, Evans' heart-wrenching chorus collided with Ham's tender melody, and magic happened. Wow. The result was a song that would become one of the most gut-wrenching ballads ever. Especially when Harry Nilsson got behind it. You know, when Nilsson first heard Without You, he was at a party in Laurel Canyon in LA's Hollywood Hills. Harry actually mistook the song as a Beatles tune, but since he was such a huge Beatlemaniac, he was shocked that he hadn't heard this song before. He discovered it was an album cut by Badfinger, and he knew that he had to cut his own version. He knew it was a hit.
Rise, your sorrow shows.
So for his Nilsson Schmilsson album, which I've got on the rack right there from 1971, Harry envisioned a raw, stripped-down version, just him and a piano, stark and heavy, which probably could have been pretty cool. But producer Richard Perry, he had a different vision for the song. He actually convinced Harry Nilsson to go bigger, transforming the song into a theatrical powerhouse. An emotional tidal wave of crashing orchestration and soaring dramatics. Harry fought his prolific producer during the recording sessions, famous for these big fights. Harry wanted something similar to the brooding Badfinger original, but Richard imagined it as a breathtaking power ballad before that term even existed. Richard remembered the struggle all too well. In an interview with Mojo Magazine, he recalled how reluctant that Nilsson was to turn the song into this grand production. He said, "I had to practically force him to give it a shot with the rhythm section." Even as we were recording, he kept grumbling to all the musicians in the studio, saying, "This song is awful."
Yes, it shows.
Nilsson didn't want an orchestral arrangement. He constantly belittled the song to all of these musicians, actually asking in exasperation, "Does anybody even know what the song is about? I can't stand it. How could anyone like the song? It's crap." It's as if Nilsson was desperately or deliberately trying to sabotage his own track. Perry took Nilsson to a private room after this erupted and begged him to stop trying to derail their efforts to create the best track that they could. The two continued to butt heads. That is until they had a do-or-die moment when Perry said to Nilsson, "You remember when you came to me and asked me to produce your album? And my only condition was that I would have creative control." And Nilsson looked at him directly, right in the eye, and he said, "Yeah, well, I lied." Of course, Harry, he eventually relented and let Richard Perry take over, one of the greatest producers ever. And he produced one of the greatest tracks of all time, a production that showcased Harry Nilsson's incredible voice. Now, looking back at Nilsson's life in the early 70s, it's not hard to see why he wasn't thrilled about Without You becoming the big dramatic ballad that would be a huge hit. As gifted as he was, Nilsson had a complicated relationship with fame, almost like he was trying to keep it at arm's length, which is probably a good thing in a lot of ways. Now, the success of Without You brought Harry a lot of fame and fortune, but it also pushed him deeper into drinking. Alcoholism ran in his family, so he was already vulnerable. After the song shot to #1 in the UK and Ireland and the Philippines and South Africa and Canada and here in the Hot 100 in America, Harry's life started to spiral out of control. He ruptured his vocal cords after having a screaming contest with John Lennon. This mixed with his heavy drinking, his career and health never bounced back from that. He actually passed away from heart failure in 1994, just 52 years of age, right when his song hit #1 again, this time with Mariah Carey at the helm. Wow, ponder that history for a few seconds, man. Pete Ham, Tom Evans, Harry Nilsson, all three were forever connected to Without You and will always be. All three passed away at a very young age. The power in power ballad is emotional authenticity, and that quality has to be there to qualify. Without You is the perfect blueprint for a power ballad. It starts with that raw, undeniable emotion, an aching sincerity that cuts deep, making you feel every bit of the heartbreak, wondering how it could feel exactly what you're feeling. And that's what they invented. Oh, that's a heavy one to start with. Coming in at #4 in our Anatomy of a Power Ballad episode is Lady, the breakthrough song by Styx, and another song that gets associated with inventing the power ballad. Like all true power ballads do, Lady came straight from Dennis DeYoung's heart. It was written for his wife, Suzanne Fauzi. The first song he'd ever written for her. He wrote others for her, the birthday song Babe, which was one of the first power ballads he hit #1. 'Cause you know it's you, babe. Here's what Dennis told me about Lady.
I wrote Lady, and to this day, you know, I have tried to understand and figure out where that came from musically. All I know was I said this before, I was listening to Court of the Crimson King when I wrote it.
To the court of the crimson.
I don't see what that has to do with anything other than ladies and lords and all that kind of highfalutin, proggy crap that was floating around for a number of years. But the piano thing, I'm not a piano player. I'm an accordion player, but all that trilly stuff and the way I play, that's just what I'm capable of doing. In other words, if you want me to sit down at the Holiday Inn tonight at the piano bar and play you 45 minutes on the piano, you got the wrong guy.
Yeah. And JY's stellar guitar work. Especially that triumphant drum line that just bolsters that big chorus. Do you remember where that came from? Because that feels like just takes the song, even the marching part.
Yeah, that's a bolero. Although bolero was not in 4/4 most of the time. I mean, like Ravel's bolero, the most famous of all of them. And as I was a music teacher, don't know if you know that about me, and I was teaching music history at the time. And of course, I played the kids Ravel's bolero. But really, one of my first idols was Roy Orbison. And he had that kind of operatic, dramatic singing style.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I'm crying, dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 da. There's a bolero, and I'm crying. So I thought, well, let's do that.
So Lady is a song that many music historians regard as the first power rock ballad. That was released from Styx 2, went to number 23 in Australia, number 19 in Canada, and number 6 here in the Billboard Hot 100. Its highest ascent was in Africa, where it hit number 3, and it actually hit number 2 in Zimbabwe. When considering the anatomy of a power ballad, ranking right up there with Styx's Lady is our number 3 pick, Love Hurts by Nazareth.
Love hurts.
Even after finding out that Love Hurts was originally an Everly Brothers song, it's still hard to wrap my head around.
Love hurts. Love scars.
It's not just that Nazareth's version sounds completely different. It's that their take on it. The song helped define the power rock ballad for sure. It's got all the essential elements, setting the stage for an entire genre. Love Hurts was written by Boudleaux Bryant, who wrote hundreds of songs with his wife and his writing partner Felice Bryant, including several Everly Brothers hits like All I Have to Do Is Dream and the bluegrass standard Rocky Top. Now, Don and Phil Everly intended to release Love Hurts as a single, but label politics got in the way. Roy Orbison actually had a number 5 hit in Australia with his cover. It was a B-side to Running Scared, but it was generally a deep album cut at best.
Like a cloud, holds a lot of rain.
Nazareth was known as a hard rock act. The title track from their album Hair of the Dog was much more indicative of who the band was, really. Recording a tender love song, that was a big departure for this group. However, the members of Nazareth were big fans of the Everly Brothers. It's like many of the artists who broke through in the 60s and 70s. They believed Love Hurts had the potential to be more than just a heartfelt ballad. It could become a rock anthem. Now, they'd heard the Emmylou Harris and Graham Parsons rendition of the song, and they were struck by its unique interpretation compared to the versions by the Everly Brothers and Roy Orbison. Now, influenced by this rendition of Love Hurts, the one by Emmylou Harris and Graham Parsons, Nazareth planned their version kind of around that a little bit, but there was a big hiccup. While bandmates Pete and Dan were away at a wedding in Scotland, Daryl and Manny recorded the backing track in the same exact key as Emmylou's version. Problem is, the key was several steps above the sweet spot for Dan McCafferty's vocal range, for his style. But despite this challenge, McCafferty surprised himself and everybody else by pushing his voice to reach a range he didn't know he could, didn't know that he had. Key to this transformation, it was that powerful snarling delivery by Dan, adding a whole new layer of intensity to this track. Now looking back, Dan and his bandmates, they felt that if they hadn't made that change, that mistake, their interpretation would have lost its edge. It would have lost its passion. It would not have been a hit. So Harry Nilsson had Richard Perry, the great producer we just talked about. Nazareth had Jerry Moss. He was an invaluable navigator that gave the band credible direction when they presented a batch of songs for him to review for Hair of the Dog. Of course, Jerry was the M and A&M Records, the American label for Nazareth. At first, the guys wanted to put their cover of Randy Newman's Guilty on Hair of the Dog and, put Love Hurts on the shelf. But here's where Moss's invaluable experience came in. He told them to scrap Guilty and put Love Hurts on the album. Of course, the band obliged, and it became their breakthrough hit in America. I love Dan McCafferty's performance on Love Hurts, especially when he hits those high notes in the bridge. That specific section of the Nazareth rendition, along with a guitar solo by the band's co-founder producer Manny Charlton, truly make Love Hurts a consummate power ballad. Released as the first single from Hair of the Dog, Love Hurts became a bona fide smash. It went to #1 in Belgium, Holland, Norway, South Africa, and Canada. In the States, the song made its way to #8 on the Billboard Hot 100. Should have been a #1 hit. What a song. Coming in at the bridesmaid position, we have a song that shows the seismic power of the power ballad. I've got Still Lovin' You, the Euro metal power ballad by the Scorpions.
I'm still loving you.
It was released in June of '84 as the second single from the Scorps' 9th studio album, the classic Love at First Sting. For years, the melody for Still Lovin' You lingered in guitarist Rudolf Schenker's mind. Haunting, yearning, but unfinished. He knew it had something special, but the timing was never quite right. It took 6 long years of holding on to that idea, waiting for the perfect moment to bring it to life. And then one day, fellow Scorpions guitarist Matthias Jabs added his touch, a guitar part that clicked into place like fate itself. Instantly, they felt it. Klaus Meine, you really felt it. Realizing this song needed words that matched its depth, its musical depth, Klaus set out to find him. One cold day, he wandered alone into the snow-covered fields, the crisp air biting at his skin, is how he explains it. The solitude, the stillness, it stirred something inside of him. The words began to form. A story of love hanging by a thread, of heartbreak and hope intertwined. When he returned home, he poured those emotions onto the page, and just like that, Still Lovin' You arrived. A song about lovers standing at the edge of goodbye, yet refusing to let go without one last fight. It's an old age tale, one that a lot of us can relate to, of course, because who hasn't wished for just one more chance?
I'm loving you.
The inherent emotional sentiment of the song, along with its overt sexuality, that created a pretty funny urban myth, but it might be true. In '85, Still Lovin' You was one of the most popular songs in France. When the band made an appearance on a TV show there, the interviewer, he made a humorous statement that the Scorpions' ballad was responsible for a baby boom in the nation nicknamed the Hexagon. Rudolf Schenker said in an interview, and I quote, "Still Loving You, the song of love, created a baby boom in France. But we didn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. We were on a TV show in France between recordings, and the host, a very famous guy that interviews us each year, says, 'Hey, you guys, you know what? You're responsible for the baby boom of '85. We're laughing like, what? And yeah, it's been measured by the government. It's unbelievable, I tell you. Those were his words. Of course, Scorpions are no stranger to a single song changing the world, shaking the world. They would do that years later as the Berlin Wall came down with Wind of Change. Man, power music. Scorpions, what better group to represent that? Man, Still Loving You was on the chart for nearly 5 months. It climbed all the way to number 3. Same in Switzerland and Belgium. In the Scorpions' native Germany, the song wasn't quite as successful. Peaked at number 14. In the US, the single didn't do as well, went to number 64, but it was a quintessential power ballad, beginning with a slow tempo, building an emotional intensity, with a towering chorus and a heavy guitar riff, and creating a baby boom. The power of the power ballad. The song at number 1 at the end of our episode here defined the power ballad, but was not part of a baby boom. But it was perhaps the most heartwarming, with a nostalgic longing that still resonates powerfully since its initial release in '85. It was so popular, it forced MTV to rewrite the rules of its network and basically made every rock band that released an album after change their entire marketing plan. I got Motley Crue with Home Sweet Home. Motley's Home Sweet Home, man, it hits deep, even if you're not a Crue fan, especially when life feels like a nonstop whirlwind. Written by Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, the song is anchored by that unforgettable anthemic line, "I'm on my way, home sweet home." I'm on my way. I'm on my way. It's the kind of track that makes you pause, take a breath, and suddenly find yourself longing for the people who truly have your back, or longing to go back to that time in the 80s. After 18 grueling months on the road at this time, Motley Crue finally came home. But instead of celebrating, they found themselves in a strange limbo. Unsure of what to do with themselves after the nonstop chaos of touring, naturally they did what they did best. They started writing for their next album. As they worked on what would become the Theater of Pain album, classic, a song started to take shape, and it came from a deep, almost unexpected place. That longing for home after being away for so long, something they just experienced. And I'm coming on this long, winding road. Nikki Sixx remembered how the lyrics flowed straight from that feeling. It was ironic, really. They were living every musician's dream, traveling the world, playing for thousands of screaming fans. But at a certain point, the glitz and adrenaline, they weren't enough. All they wanted to do was go back to where they truly belonged, and that's what Home Sweet Home expresses so perfectly. It's an emotive ballad about coming back to the one place that makes you whole. We all have it, whatever your happy place is. When they recorded the album Theater of Pain, it became a war with their record label, Elektra. Elektra absolutely hated Home Sweet Home. They even said it was horrible. They said, you have to take that song off the record. You guys, you're not a ballad band. But the band, especially Nikki Sixx, was adamant about keeping the song. He fought him tooth and nail, reminding him that the band was right about their cover of Smoking in the Boys' Room when the label said it wouldn't work, and they knew they were right about Home Sweet Home. But the label dug in. They said they wouldn't support the song, so the band actually funded a music video for the song out of their own pocket. Without any support from the label, though, Home Sweet Home entered the Hot 100 on October 26, 1985, and a few weeks later it peaked at number 89, and then it fell off the charts. On the mainstream rock chart, it barely broke the top 40. It went to number 39. In the UK, it didn't fare well at all. It peaked at number 51. It's such a waste. You know I'm a dreamer. The song had faltered because the label didn't support it. They never worked it at radio at all. They just left it to die. Here's where it gets interesting. As I said, Motley Crue paid for the music video out of their own pockets, and they submitted it to MTV, like all bands do. And the video was a revelation on MTV. It was so well received, fans flooded the request lines for over 3 months begging for this video. They couldn't get enough of it. MTV was playing it twice an hour. It got so crazy, MTV had to rewrite its own rules. They invoked the unwritten Crue rule, meaning that from then on out, music videos came with an expiration date. 30 days after their MTV premiere, videos would be dropped from the request line. Incidentally, Home Sweet Home was the most requested video in early MTV history, specifically from 81 to about 86, 87. And on the strength of the music video alone, Motley Crue broke into the mainstream and established Home Sweet Home as one of their signature songs, a song so massive it forced MTV to write a stupid rule, and it went for every act that came after that. And in the process, Motley Crue inadvertently introduced the concept of the commercial power ballad, and this is where it became a trendsetter. You gotta remember, before 1985, hard rock and metal bands weren't exactly known for pouring their hearts out with big emotional ballads, not at all. At least not as a formula. But when Motley Crue dropped this track from Theater of Pain, it rewrote the playbook. After that, the floodgates opened. By the late 80s, bands like Poison, Every Rose Has a Thorn, and Guns N' Roses with Patience, and Skid Row, I Remember You, and Warrant with Heaven, they were all following the same template. Blistering rock anthems balanced by a heartfelt, slow-burning ballad that enhanced their audience. It lengthened their album cycle with both men and women.
They say every rose has its thorn.
Of course, Home Sweet Home wasn't the first power ballad ever written. There are bands like Journey and Foreigner and Styx and Night Ranger and REO had already tested out the dynamic. But it was Motley Crue who really upped the ante, capturing Gen X and the MTV generation. Home Sweet Home, it didn't just pave the way for power ballads. It made them essential. If you were a hard rock or hair band in the late 80s, having a power ballad, it wasn't just an option. It was the key to superstardom. Home Sweet Home, it actually had a second wind. Remixed and released in 91, it was a hit all over again, and it hit the top 40 here in America. So in closing, there are a number of other tracks that should be mentioned in the legacy of the power ballad. We actually did a feature on Goodbye to Love by the Carpenters. Some have called this the first power ballad because of that fuzzy guitar work by Tony Peluso, and Karen Carpenter's sincerity manifested in the John Bettis, Richard Carpenter lyrics. But some rock purists, they won't be caught dead giving recognition to a song by the Carpenters. I love the Carpenters. Not a guilty pleasure at all. I love them. Regardless, this song was groundbreaking when it was released in '72 and checked the boxes for what defines a power ballad. Bands like REO with Keep On Loving You, Take It On the Run, certainly were purveyors of the power ballad. As was Foreigner with songs like Feels Like the First Time, Waiting for a Girl Like You, and I Want to Know What Love Is, and of course, Journey. So they were doing it for a long time. We're just scratching the surface here. We'll have more anatomy episodes in the future. What would you like to see in the future on our anatomy of? I would love to get your feedback on that. So let's have a spirited discussion. What do you think is the first power ballad ever? What's your favorite power ballads? How about these stories? What are your memories of these songs? And what would you say are the top 5 power ballads of all time? Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.